Hello beautiful people, welcome to the video. I am launching a new series titled Nerd Shit. Got my nerd glasses on, so basically we're going to talk more about the science, the theoretical and applications of science in regard to building muscle, performance, fat loss, composition, and things like that, even sports supplementation. Obviously the reason and my main motivations for doing this is, you don't have to go far in the comment section to any fitness page, be it on YouTube, be it on Instagram, what have you. And you can just see a lot of misguided, misdirected people. And I feel that a lot of this stuff, even though it is complex in its entirety, it's actually simplistic, I guess as an overview. And that's basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the sciences, I'm going to dumb it down as much as I can, and really just try to give you guys more of a applications approach to how to do certain things. So whether it's your supplementation, how much should you take, when should you take it, who should take it, the time of day you should take it, your training, which is we'll talk about today, cardio, various other things as well. So, for episode 1 of Nerd Shit, what are we going to talk about? Let me get my PowerPoint up because I actually have a PowerPoint to keep myself nice and directed. We're going to talk about gaining muscle, or actually how muscles grow. Because I feel like if you understand how muscles grow, it's very easy to discern whether or not a program is going to be worth your while or not. There's an old saying that there's many roads that lead to the same place, and this is obviously true in the realm of building muscle, because as you'll see, there's many vectors for growth. However, we want to make sure that we are applying in a very practical way these vectors, because there's a lot of things that you can do, or you can misapply a misapplication of these things, which will lead to like injuries and basically just hindered results. So, without getting too long-winded, we're going to talk about it. So basically, first and foremost, we're going to talk a little bit about muscle physiology. You have type 1, which is your slow twitch, and you have type 2, which is your fast twitch. You have subsets of it. You have like type 2A, type 2B, type 2X. The differences between those is some of them are very heavily reliant on the phosphocreatine system, very explosive, and some have more glycolytic capacity. And then obviously these are going to be more of your power muscle fibers, and then you have the slow twitch, which are the more aerobic muscle fibers. Now when we're building muscle, we're talking about either one of two things: myofibrillar hypertrophy, or we're talking about sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. People may not know this, but only about 23 to 25% of your muscle is actual protein. And this is mainly made up of the filaments, actin and myosin, and all the different things that anchor them and hold them together to create a sarcomere. And the rest is obviously cellular matrix, ground substance, water, and various other organelles and things like that. So non-myofibril, so basically the sarcoplasm. And we're talking about sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, we're talking about an increase of basically everything within that realm to increase the size and diameter of the muscle. So in actuality, what has the most growth potential is obviously going to be sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, just because it takes up more volume within the muscle. However, myofibrillar hypertrophy is also just as important. Now, when we're talking about hypertrophy, as you can see, this is very complex. We're also talking about two different things. We're talking about either muscle fiber hypertrophy, where the muscles increase in size, or we're talking about muscle fiber hyperplasia, where we get increase in the number of muscle fibers. And when we talk about the different vectors of growth, you'll see actually how this process occurs. So now that we got some of those definitions out of the way, for people who give a fuck, let's get back into the nerd shit. So there is 3 vectors that we know based off of the evidence that can lead to muscle growth, increase in muscle size. Number 1, mechanical tension. So basically, when we're thinking about mechanical tension, the most simplest way that I can really explain it to you is the fact is, like, say for example, your 1 rep max is 100 pounds on the bench press, which is weak as fuck, even if you're a girl. But let's just say, for example, your 1 rep max is 100 pounds. 100 pounds is going to produce the most tension on the muscle, obviously, and then 50 pounds will be less tense. So we're talking about tension, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about just sitting there like, oh, squeezing it and everything else. We're talking about the tension that's generated through exercise and these various movements with applied resistance. Number 2, muscle damage. More specifically, exercise-induced muscle damage. The reason why I think it's important we make that distinction is because I can go up to you and I can just punch you as hard as I can in your chest, and you will bruise and there'll be damage to the muscle. Your chest is not going to grow any bigger or get any stronger. So that's why we have to make sure that, and if anybody who is familiar with exercise science and the literature, it's always referred to as exercise-induced muscle damage. How does this occur? Basically anything that is exercise related that produces enough stress to basically disrupt these structures of those muscle fibers, micro tears and various other distortions that can occur in it. And this is most evident during the eccentric phase or the lowering phase. So if you're doing a bench press and you're lowering it, you are actually creating a lot more muscle damage by focusing on the eccentric. Number 3, metabolic stress. Now, metabolic stress is going to be more geared towards sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, even though they all, in an indirect way, contribute to one of those 3 pathways. But metabolic stress basically is when you get an accumulation of various different substances within the muscle that is produced via exercise, inorganic phosphates, NO, hydrogen ions, which changes the pH balance of it. I mean, various other things as well. So these are basically going to be what we refer to as metabolic stress. Metabolic stress, according to the literature, is just as effective as mechanical tension, though I will argue that mechanical tension over the long run is probably going to be much more beneficial in terms of muscle growth. So I won't go into too much detail, but basically with mechanical tension, you have certain structures that respond to stress in that tension that activate certain pathways that elicit growth. So with mechanical tension, what we really get is an activation of that mTOR pathway, which will lead to muscle growth. With exercise-induced muscle damage, what you'll see, obviously, you'll get an increase in satellite cell proliferation, which will increase myonuclei donation, and this is where we'll see muscle cell hyperplasia, or an increase of muscle fibers. And then obviously there's downstream, upstream signaling pathways that occur from metabolic stress that increase certain substances, substrate, satellite cells, a lot of other things to initiate the growth of the substances that we are hypertrophying. That is the most basic way that I could possibly explain it. We can go into like the different graphs and flow charts like we do in undergrad level exercise physiology, graduate level exercise physiology, but it doesn't really help you to know exactly. You just need to know what type of things will lead to muscle growth. Now, how do you apply this in a workable way? Because obviously, if we think of it where it's like, I'm going to create the most tension, the most damage, and the most metabolic stress, and I'm going to be fucking huge. No. What you're going to do is going to be very injured and very weak and very small forever. So, I digress. Let me get some water. So there's a practical way to apply these different strategies in a way that will not negatively affect recovery and will make your workouts more productive. And I'll explain to you how I apply it, but there's also various other ways, but I'll just explain to you how I apply it. So with mechanical tension, it's not enough to have just a very high mechanically tense set. If you just do one rep, that's not going to do anything. What we need is an accumulation of reps and an accumulation of high mechanical tension reps, or what people refer to as effective reps. So this is where volume starts to come in. So we want to accumulate enough volume under that tension in order to basically reap the hypertrophic benefits. So what I would recommend as a rep scheme is anywhere between 5 to 10 reps will allow you to use a load that is heavy enough to generate a considerable amount of mechanical tension and also a considerable amount of volume. However, 10 reps for one set is not enough, and obviously if these are very heavy sets, you're probably going to have to see a performance decline from set to set. So this is what I do to take advantage of mechanical tension and also metabolic stress is I'll decrease the weight by however much. You know, it's arbitrary at this point. I just want to decrease it enough to where I can know I can elicit enough metabolic stress through a higher rep scheme. So let's say, for example, I'm benching, and let's say I do 260 for 8 reps. I'll take the weight down to 250 and I'll do 12 reps. So what I did was I had a very high mechanical tension set, and then I had a set that stimulated mechanical metabolic stress. Now, obviously we're talking about volume. You would want to do that with enough exercise too, so you want to make sure that your exercise selection is on point. I recommend varying your movements so there's not a lot of overlap. So a good way to understand this is that you want 10 good sets for your chest for that workout. We'll just say we're training the chest. We want it with a high mechanical tension set that has enough volume and a metabolic stress set. And understand that all of these things, if you are actually controlling the bar, will also induce exercise-induced muscle damage as well. So that's why I'm not even mentioning it. I'm just assuming that you're doing that. So let's say, for example, you want 10 good sets. So you want 5 exercises, you know, basically top set, back off set for each exercise. Make sure that you're varying your exercise. Like the chest, you can use a variety of different angles, things like that. And then basically you can do that twice a week. That way you're getting at least enough volume that's sufficient for growth, which is, you know, anywhere between 15 to 20 sets per week. I know some people argue that if you're training hard enough, you're stimulating it enough, you can do it in one workout. I don't recommend this. As you get stronger, that is going to be a bitch of a mountain to climb. So this is the most practical way to do it. Now, everybody's going to be different. Not everybody's going to be able to tolerate such immense volumes. I can for my upper body. For my lower body, I can only train my legs once a week. I train them very hard. I get a sufficient amount of volume for the muscle groups that I'm training, but you also have to understand I'm a men's physique athlete as well. However, I still apply the same principles. I have a very mechanically tense set within a certain designated rep scheme, and then I have a metabolic stress set. All of these things, what they're going to do is create these physiological changes within the muscle, which will eventually lead to growth of that muscle. It doesn't happen within a workout, it happens over time. That's why, you know, you have to understand that you'll start to see sort of these curves where you'll see an increase in performance, growth, everything, and then things kind of plateau. Then you actually see a little bit of decline. That's normal. Obviously, if you're training hard, you're gonna back off, and when you go back in, you're probably not gonna be at the same exact strength level. But the idea is that you're gaining weight and you're gaining strength in those rep schemes necessary to elicit those exact adaptations that we're trying to do with these training principles to harness those different vectors of growth. So, let me recap. We went over the different muscle fiber types and all of everything else. 3 vectors of growth. Mechanical tension. Obviously, the heavier the weight is, you are going to increase joint stress and all these other things as well. So we don't want to do 1 rep maxes or anything like that. 5 to 10 reps will suffice. Make sure that you induce enough metabolic stress as well concurrently within the workout, and you can do this with obviously back off sets. You can do it with other things too. You can do BFR training, you can do drop sets, you could do extended sets, giant sets. I mean, do whatever the fuck you want, as long as you're doing it in a practical way to where you're not just doing things willy-nilly just off the drop of a hat. Make sure that there's actually a rhyme and reason for what it is that you're doing, you know, and that's another video in and of itself when we talk about exercise selection, exercise order, exercise execution. But anyways, today on Nerd Shit, we're talking about how muscles grow. I hope everybody enjoys the video. Take care and have a great day.